Story 1. Sneaked out at midnight, biked across town to meet friends, and made it back before anyone noticed. Felt like a secret mission at the time. Story 2. I did lie. I had a cousin who was mean to me, trapped me under boats with spiders, tied me up with a jump rope, made me watch spiders eat baby toads, and threw spiders at me. During Easter, I was given a hula hoop, which I bent and blamed on him. He had to buy me a new one and was upset because no one believed him when he said he didn't do it. I cried and acted heartbroken that my new toy was broken, but in truth, I don't feel bad at all. He deserved worse. He still talks about it when he sees me once in a while, and I still act like I have no clue what he's talking about. Story 3. I was a teenager, so I don't know if it counts, but I basically made a secret copy of any key I got my hands on. My mom and aunt's old office turn storage key, my grandparents' house key, an extended family village in the countryside key. I was chilling in people's houses when they were away. I didn't do anything crazy, just enjoyed the freedom and peace. Years later, I told my dad. He told me he stole a key to a unit in his university to store his books on site. He quietly returned it upon graduating. I'm definitely his daughter. Story 4. I eventually told my mother, but I think it still counts. I pet a lioness through the fence at the local zoo. My aunt was distracted trying to keep up with my cousins, and I tended to be a little slower anyway. While following the group, I noticed a lioness walking along the fence line and a lion resting in the shade nearby. There were no adults around. This was my one chance, so I slipped under the barrier and over to the fence, stuck my hand through, and stroked her side as she passed by. I was impressed and slightly disappointed at how coarse her fur was. I quickly pulled my hand out and scrambled back to the path as she turned around to see what was disturbing her. Nobody suspected anything. I just got a minor scolding for taking so long to catch up with the group. I will probably hold that as my favorite moment of childhood. I was so dumb for that, but it was so cool. Story 5. My grandmother was mean. When I was about 8, I climbed through the downstairs window and wandered through the house. I ate every single biscuit in the tin, then left through the front door. I did this regularly, then upped my game by moving ornaments. My grandmother thought she had a ghost and talked about it all the time. I used to sit there all innocent and very smug. No one knew until years later when I told my brothers. She died when I was 15, never knowing. Fancy thinking a ghost would eat Garibaldi biscuits. Story 6. I used to climb through the neighbor's barbed wire fence and run around, disturbing his cows until they became angry or the bull appeared. Story 7. I skipped school one day in high school to skateboard in New York City. It was the day the World Trade Center was bombed with a van in the parking lot. When I got home, after riding the train with many people who had been there and were talking about it, I accidentally said, "Oh my God, did you guys hear?" Just as the news came on at dinner. My mom asked how I already knew. This news segment was the first time anyone would have heard if they had not been listening to the radio. News traveled slowly back then. I told them the teachers at school mentioned it when we were leaving. Story 8. My best friend and I were trying to make pancakes while his grandmother was out. We were very little. Instead of using flour, we used starch, and the batter was very liquidy. We had already used all the eggs and milk in the fridge, and my friend was worried his grandmother would yell at him. So we took the pan with the unfortunate batter and threw it from the balcony on the 5th floor. We made sure no one was standing near the apartment complex. What we did not know was that a very unfriendly neighbor from the floor below was reading a book on her balcony, and the flying batter struck her in the face. We heard yelling and cursing, and 2 minutes later she was banging on our door. Totally frightened, I told my friend to stand by the door quietly and grab something heavy in case she tried to break it down. The joys of childhood. She left after banging on the door for about 10 minutes. My grandmother cursed too, but years later told us how hard she was laughing with my grandfather that day. Story 9. To preface, we were almost always home alone due to my father's work schedule. When I was 16 or 17, I secretly smoked cigarettes. Being clever, I filled a milk jug with sand and put my cigarette butts in it, then stashed it behind an old grill on our very old deck. One morning, I came out to discover a perfectly milk jug-sized hole burned into the deck. Looking through the hole, I saw the shriveled remains of my shame lying on the ground below. I ended up creating a brace from underneath with some nails, set a block of wood on it, then spent 2 days meticulously applying wood filler on the top and underside of the wood block. Each time I finished, I slid the grill right over it. While my father was at work, I asked if it was okay to paint the shabby old deck, and he of course said yes. I used textured deck paint from the Home Depot to conceal my handiwork further. He sold that house 10 years ago, and to my knowledge, nobody ever noticed. My best friend happens to know the person who purchased my childhood home, and one of the first remodels they did was a brand new deck, so I think I got away with this one. Story 10. When I was 14, I developed a bad habit of going into people's houses in nearby neighborhoods when they were not home and just walking around. I had no harmful intentions. It just felt fun to sneak in and see how people kept their houses. I never stayed long, just popped in, wandered for a couple of minutes, and left. I did this about 7 or 8 times over a few months before I read that serial killers did similar things, which made me feel like a creep, so I stopped. Story 11. Told both our parents my friend Kevin and I were going to a movie. Instead, we drove an hour and a half to the beach, stayed there less than an hour, bought saltwater taffy, then turned around and went back home. Age 16. Never told them. Seems pretty innocent now, although if anything had gone wrong so far away, it would have been a disaster. Where did you say you are? Story 12. My brother, sister-in-law, and I snuck out of my parents' house on Christmas evening to walk to the bar. We waited until they turned on the dishwasher to drown out the noise of us leaving. We walked down the street in a very small town in rural South Dakota, got a little drunk, and then walked back. My parents had no idea until nearly 15 years later. It does not sound too scandalous because we were all over the age of 21, but my dad was the pastor and lived in the church parsonage. The congregation would have judged my parents harshly for our behavior, and my parents would have been livid about the trouble we would have caused. The town and church felt like living in a fishbowl. My dad did not become a pastor until I was graduating from high school, so I did not grow up as a pastor's kid, and this was the only experience I had. Story 13. One night in high school, I called into work sick and went out with friends. We were driving around in the woods when I hit some ice and slid into a tree. I opened my car door and looked down. A straight drop down. I immediately shut the door and started to panic. I very carefully put the car in reverse and eased it back from the tree, then drove home at about 15 miles per hour in complete silence. Story 14. Nearly burned down the shed playing with some old gasoline in an open plastic can when I was about 13. Nobody else was home, and I was bored on a lazy summer afternoon. It was not a disaster until I tried putting it out with a bucket of water. The flare-up looked like an oil rig explosion, with fire going in all directions, somehow missing my feet. I ended up blistering a bunch of paint on the outside of the corrugated metal shed before I got the fire out with a disposable fire extinguisher. Somehow, I did not burn myself. I sanded down and repainted the damaged area with some leftover paint, tossed the fire extinguisher, and never said a word until now. That was nearly 30 years ago. Do not play with gasoline, kids. Story 15. It's bad. I have felt guilty about it for nearly 30 years. My best friend Barbara and I were home alone at her house. We were 16. Barbara's house was way out in the countryside, and we were bored. She said, "Hey, my dad has a beer in his cabinet. Let's drink it." We drank a little. It was nasty. We put it back. Here's the terrible part. The beer was decades old. He had bought it in Guam when he was serving in the military. This was a 30-year-old unopened bottle. He never said a word, and I pray he never noticed. He has passed since then, and I still feel bad. Why are teenagers so thoughtless? Story 16. I set a doghouse on fire in the yard of a long-abandoned house. No dogs were made homeless by my actions. That's how I found out just how flammable nail polish remover is. I managed to put the fire out before any neighbors noticed, but 12-year-old me was very scared while doing so. I also broke into the abandoned house to explore. I used to climb a specific billboard with a friend and jump onto the roof of a daycare next to it. We outran an approaching train because we did not want to wait for it to pass before continuing our exploring. Honestly, in general, I was pretty well behaved overall and usually kept my shenanigans low-key and harmless. Story 17. Oh gosh. So many things. My parents were older and very strict. I wasn't allowed to do normal things that my friends and classmates did, like go to school dances. So I learned to be extremely sneaky. I would have friends cover for me and go to dances, go out with boys, smoke cigarettes, and get drunk. It's really a miracle I wasn't harmed. I went skinny dipping in the creek with one of my high school boyfriends, and about an hour in discovered there were large fish swimming with us. I climbed him like a monkey trying to get out of the water. I had a lot of adventures. Story 18. I wasn't a kid, but at my old job, my coworkers and I were hanging out after the managers went home. We worked at a large outdoor gun range and had lots of fun. We were doing donuts in the mud with my truck and the company four-wheelers. I lost control of my truck and plowed into one of the supports of a wooden gazebo, causing it to collapse. My coworkers helped me prop it up so it didn't look damaged at first glance. The next morning, I came in very early with my tools and fixed the damaged part, bracing the broken wood. It had been painted not too long ago, so I found a can of paint in the storage room and painted over my repairs to make them look old. My boss never found out and my coworkers never told. Story 19. Kissed boyfriend goodnight at the front door, then kissed him hello at the back window 30 minutes later after waiting for parents to go to bed. Story 20. When I was 12, I grabbed two of my father's beers while they were home, went out front, opened both of them, raised my middle fingers and yelled out, "That's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so," then slammed them together and dumped them on my face. Story 21. Mom and stepdad were on a weekend trip. My brother and I were home alone. I was 15 and he was 13. I wanted to go to the shop to buy some snacks, but it was about 2 kilometers down a steep hill, and I did not want to walk all the way back up again with a couple of liters of Coca-Cola and chips. So I took my mom's car. You have to be 18 to get a driver's license here. But my dad had been teaching me to drive since I was 13, and I was good at it. Off I went, and of course, I met the local police officer down the road, passing in the other direction. Luckily for me, I look a lot like my mom, so he just lifted a hand in greeting and drove on. I managed to get the Coca-Cola and snacks and get back home without being caught, but I never did anything like that again. Story 22. Some other students and I at my school were tasked with spray painting props for either the theater department or the marching band, but I do not remember which. We also spray painted phrases like, "Initials was here," on the trees we used to prop them up. We did not realize those trees were on private property, and the forestry class from the high school had to clean them off. We never got in trouble because there were no cameras, and we were the only people there as we were left completely unsupervised. I still feel somewhat bad about it. Story 23. I grew cannabis in the attic. The only access was through my bedroom. If my parents needed something upstairs, they would always ask me and never went up themselves. Eventually, my friends and I put an old couch up there, and we would hang out and smoke. My father had a weak sense of smell, and I think my mother just did not care. Story 24. I was playing secret agent as a kid and put a dried bean in my ear to pretend it was an earpiece. I pressed it and pretended I was talking to someone. I pressed too hard and it slipped in. I decided not to tell anyone. Maybe 4 or 5 years later, I had a hard time hearing out of that ear, so a doctor flushed it out and was amazed at the size of the earwax glob that came out. I immediately knew what it was but kept quiet. Story 25. I kind of exchanged their documents for an administrator position on a Grand Theft Auto San Andreas online server. The person who asked me was much older. I did not see a problem at the time. Story 26. Dropped a massive packed snowball from a ski lift onto a car below. I am so mortified that I did this. I regretted it instantly and hoped that the car was mostly unscathed and, if not, that the driver was okay. Story 27. Probably not as unusual as other items on this list, but my mother always somehow discovered whenever I did something, so I do not have much to share. I managed to break the back of the toilet seat by leaning too hard on it. Nobody ever found out it was me. Story 28. I found some dog waste, took a stamp and envelope from my parents, and mailed it to my school by dropping it into a mailbox. I never found out if it arrived. I should have sent it by registered mail. Story 29. Took a few buses and light rail trains to the next city over with two of my girlfriends to attend a party and stay the night. It was not very smart or safe, but we were fine. Story 30. At the age of 14, with all my years of wisdom, I decided that my cousin, also 14, should have a couple of beers with the cute 22-year-old man we met at the pool in our aunt's apartment complex that day. That would have been bad enough, but no. We also thought it was a good idea to sneak out at 2 a.m. with the man to jump off the rocks into Lake Mead, using only the light of the full moon for guidance. Luckily, we were both fine after our jumps because, in hindsight, that man would most likely have taken off and left us if we had been injured. Dumb kids do dumb things. Story 31. A few times, some kids in the neighborhood and I would sneak out and stay out all night. Sometimes we would claim we were spending the night at each other's houses, and sometimes we would just climb out of our bedroom windows. We would hang out in the woods, in a treehouse, and once in someone's boat in their carport. We played truth or dare, drank, kissed, and smoked marijuana. It is wild that I was never caught. Story 32. When I was at camp around 10 or 11 years old, after we had done a hike, one of the teachers asked if we wanted to run up a big hill to the top of a dam. A bunch of us did it, came back down, and that same teacher told us that was private property and we had just trespassed. He told us we would be walking back to camp instead of getting on the bus with everyone else. We walked about 2 hours back to camp on backcountry roads. He did send 2 parent helpers with us, who expressed how upset they were with the teacher. Nothing more came of it. The parents said nothing. If I had told my mother, she would have confronted the teacher, and I probably would not have gotten in trouble. But 25 years later, I have still never told her. Story 33. One time, I helped my 15-year-old sister get a flight to Seattle and spend 4 days there without our father finding out. We had fake visitation plans with our mother and bought the tickets with a Visa gift card. Story 34. When I was 7 or 8, I would climb onto the bar chairs and jump down. One time, I landed awkwardly and hurt my wrist. I was scared of getting in trouble, so I didn't tell anyone. It hurt really badly for the rest of the day and overnight. As the week went on, it didn't hurt all the time, but it would flare up and be so painful I felt like I couldn't breathe. I finally told them I hurt it when I fell but did not elaborate. They thought I was faking but took me to the doctor. It wasn't broken, but I had to use an ugly brown leather brace for a while. Then, maybe 4 years later, I was sick at my grandma's, so she made me hot tea in a travel mug. She told me to be careful because it was hot. I was resting in her waterbed and thought it would be a good idea to take the lid off so it could cool. I spilled scalding hot tea all over my side. Of course, I didn't tell anyone. My skin peeled off and it scabbed over really badly. On the road trip back home, she saw me changing and freaked out about the awful wound on my side. I lied and said I fell off my bike and hit the curb. She was mad because I didn't tell her, and she was just bringing my parents home with an unexplained giant black scab. Anyway, I make it a point to emphasize to my kids that they can always tell me when they get hurt and they will not be in trouble. Story 35. I sneaked into my girlfriend's house at night before we were officially together. She let me in through the bathroom window. We sneaked down the corridor, past the living room door where her parents were watching television, and then went into her room. I stayed in her bed for 1 to 2 hours and sneaked back home afterwards. Story 36. A friend and I decided to set a fire in a field behind my friend's house. It was the middle of summer, and the fire spread very quickly because we foolishly used paint thinner to start it. We didn't realize how close it was to a neighbor's old wooden back gate, which suddenly went up in flames. Behind the gate were a couple of old gas bottles from a Claire gas fire, the kind of bottles used for barbecues. The explosion was the loudest I have ever heard in my life, and it ended up blowing out the neighbor's back window. The police were called, and luckily we didn't get caught. The dangerous things we did in the mid-1990s in the UK were reckless. The worst part is my parents were friends with the neighbors whose gate and window exploded. Sorry, Billy and Carol. I hope 29 years have eased the shock of the explosion. Story 37. I stole a lot. I took small things like candy bars and baseball cards from many stores. I stole money from people's wallets while they were swimming in the local pool. I stole from my parents. Not a huge amount, just a few dollars here and there, but consistently. I never stole much at any one time. I finally got caught stealing something small from a local store, and they let me off with a warning. I never stole again. In the beginning, I convinced myself that it wasn't fair that I never had any money, while all the other kids seemed to get what they wanted. I thought I was justified in taking things. There was a small adrenaline rush too that probably kept me going. When I think about it now, I'm just ashamed. I stole from people who had very little, including my own parents, and justified it with plain old narcissism. Story 38. I left a piece of modeling clay on the step of my elderly babysitter's house, hoping to trick my brother into sitting on it. Lena ended up tripping on it and breaking her arm. Story 39. I was dared to run down the sidewalk of a busy street completely naked. I lost a bet and did it. I wish I had backed out. Story 40. Told my mother I was going camping, but instead my friend dropped me in a city 2.5 hours away to stay with my girlfriend whose parents did not know. She had moved there from my hometown, so it was not like a long-distance relationship from the beginning. Spent a lot of time hiding under the bed and other unusual places. Made it home unscathed. Story 41. My friends and I used to go deep into the woods to swim, fish, and have a small fire. One day while hiking, we found a sign. I picked it up and took it with us. We started a fire, and I threw the sign into the fire. The fire grew very large quickly, producing thick black smoke. Leaves caught on fire. Someone saw the smoke, and many people came. We were trying to put out the fire by the time help arrived. We said we found the sign while hiking and fishing in the area. Could have been much worse. Story 42. This happened when I was 15 or 16, maybe a year younger. After I got into a fight with my mother over something serious, I left the house and started walking. I was tired of everything and just wanted to leave, regardless of it all. She knew I left because I called her to come get me. However, what she did not know was that not far from the house, as I was walking, a big truck pulled up beside me. This man said he was a doctor and offered me a ride if I needed it. I knew I should have said no, but I was done with everything. Whatever this man did to me, it was fine. Surprisingly, he took me where I wanted to go, wished me well, and left. This was in the early 2000s, which explains how I got so lucky. In today's world, 99% of anyone who stops to help you is going to hurt you. Story 43. I skipped class and went to a boy's house to make out and have sex in high school several times. My parents were very strict and did not allow any male who was not a relative to hang out at the house, whether they were home or not. I was also not allowed to date until I was 18. I understand why, but the problem is I still found a way. Story 44. I was alone in my bedroom, and as I reached climax, my mother walked in and covered me with blankets. I do not know if she understood what was happening, but it was very awkward. Story 45. My aunt and uncle lived next to us. I would take the mail from their mailbox, climb in through their bathroom window when I knew they were gone, set their mail on their table, feed their fish, and watch the fish tank. Story 46. I put my mother's credit card in debt. She still thinks that the Google store takes money repeatedly after you buy things. I do not want to tell her. Story 47. Used to do backflips on the playground. I didn't always stick the landings, but I kept trying anyway. Story 48. There was an extremely wealthy neighborhood in my town called the Trails. When we were teenagers, we stole the T's, so the sign said, "He rails." Story 49. I stole a blue dye mix from the school's science lab. The powder went all over my bag, and when a bottle of water leaked in my bag during lunch, it dyed the canteen floor blue. The more we tried to clean it, the more it spread everywhere. My hands were blue for 3 weeks, and I told my parents it was planted in my bag as a prank. I had to get new books, a new bag, and it also destroyed my uniform. Story 50. My friends and I had a spot in the woods in Midtown. It was a large section of creek and wooded area but not remote. We would smoke marijuana, hang out, had couches out there, and there was an old 1944 Ford Coupe abandoned nearby. It was a great place. One day, my friend put too much gasoline on the fire while trying to light it in the rain. He and the gas can caught fire. He threw the can, landed on the couch, and the whole area caught fire. We put out my friend and left quickly. The fire burned acres of land. No one was hurt, and no private property was damaged. But it was a serious incident. Story 51. My mother is still alive, so I will have to follow up because she has an uncanny knack for catching me that haunts me to this day. Story 52. Technically enhanced earth movers from the neighborhood were used for joyrides by applying cans of automatic starter left on the vehicles. Story 53. I tried to burn a house down. I got caught by the neighbors, told everyone I had seen the fire and tried to put it out. And everyone believed me because I was normally a well-behaved kid. As far as I know, no one ever told my parents. Story 54. We used to jump off a train tracks bridge into the river. Many times we would wait until the train was on the tracks so we could not back out and see who could wait the longest to jump. Story 55. My friend and I would split the cost of a single movie ticket, tear it in half and share it, voila, an instant ticket stub alibi. Then we would drive to a teen dance club about an hour away, one we were both expressly forbidden to visit. It was simply a dance place for ages 16 to 19. Nothing bad ever happened there, but we had very controlling parents. We always chose a movie that a friend had already seen so we could share the plot and a basic review if asked. Story 56. Not me, but I remember being around 12 or 13, and while finding friends in Minecraft and adding them to my Discord, I came across this kid I quickly befriended. We ended up playing all day together. I remember us talking about our experiences of meeting, playing with, and talking with notable content creators online. I was talking about the kind of YouTubers I got to play with, and then the kid I was talking to mentioned how he got to be on a call with a popular Twitch streamer. The streamer asked him to pee in a cup and film it. In my 12 or 13-year-old mind, I found it funny, and so did he, but looking back, it was disturbing. I do not remember who it was or whether he even mentioned the streamer himself, but it was strange how my underdeveloped mind found that funny. Whoever he is, I hope he is doing okay. Story 57. I was 17, just got my driver's license, and drove 2 hours to New Orleans to drive around the city at about 1 a.m. I think they believed I was at my pastor's house hanging out. Story 58. Some friends and I took a charcoal grill to the roof of our high school in the middle of the night, grilled hot dogs, and drank beer. I also accidentally entered a local university building after getting lost in the nearby steam tunnels. There are dozens of similar stories. We never stole anything or caused property damage. We just wanted to have fun because we were bored. Story 59. She found out eventually, but when I was in high school, I would hide all my report cards. I was abused, exhausted, and didn't care enough to put any effort into school until I moved in with my dad. Around 6 to 8 years after I moved out of my mom's house, I was an adult living in another state with my then boyfriend, and she called me. She found the report cards. I laughed and said, yes, I did that. I could hear in her voice that she was struggling with the knowledge that she couldn't do anything about it. It was vindicating. Also, I don't remember if I ever came clean about this, but I would lie that my brother was hitting me. That sounds terrible, but there were so many times he just beat on me with no consequences that I still don't really feel bad. I specifically remember him chasing me in circles around my grandmother's table with a table knife. I was a kid, so I just thought knife meant scary, and I was terrified. He also used to push me down and jump on my stomach with shoes on. I was a very calm, good-natured kid. One day I was sitting in a tree blowing bubbles and I was just happy. My brother came up and said, "Those are my bubbles," and whacked me in the leg with a golf club. Then I fell out of the tree onto the already injured leg he had just hit. Stuff like that happened regularly, and a lot of the time he got away with it, so I don't feel bad about pretending he was hitting me when he was just being annoying. I might feel bad if he had ever grown out of it, but the last time we spoke, about 7 years ago, he was still a bully. Story 60. Threw dry dog waste at my older brother and his friends when they harassed me and took my bicycle away. Afterward, I would run to the water spigot and wash my hands with the soap we had there. Story 61. I tripped my best friend, and he injured his hands. His parents knew about it and were surprisingly calm. My parents somehow never found out. Story 62. Probably going with a group of friends and breaking some windows of a school with rocks. My friend went there and he absolutely hated it. Story 63. When I was 12, I was hanging out with my friends in this estate. There were tents set up for a festival, and when the adults left, my friends and I basically messed around near the tents. Two teenagers tried to get us to leave, but it didn't work, and they left, presumably to report it. We just continued messing around, moving the cushions, I think. Then we were sent out by an angry-looking man. He told us to give him our parents' phone numbers. I was about to give my dad's number, feeling very scared since I grew up responsible and never really got into trouble. Just before I gave my dad's number, my friend said, "I think you know my dad." The man then told us to leave, and we did. Still, neither my dad nor my mum knows about this. I know it's tamer than other stories, but it's all I have. Story 64. I met a person from the internet who traveled across the country to take me out on a date in my city. I was 19 and she was 36. My mother thought I just went out with a friend from high school, but it was with an internet stranger nearly twice my age. Story 65. We had family friends who were quite wealthy. Usually, a couple of times each summer, they invited us to their cottage, which was basically a mansion on an island. They had two children who had their own little motorboat. For some reason, our parents thought it was fine for us kids to go out on this boat, assuming we would coast slowly around the island while wearing life jackets. That was not what we did. As soon as we were out of sight, we took off our life jackets and took turns jumping out of the boat while it was going full speed. I think the oldest any of us was maybe 13. I am shocked none of us ever drowned or hit our heads jumping off the boat. Story 66. Had intimate time with my girlfriend in my parents' bed. We had just finished getting dressed when my parents pulled up the driveway. Story 67. When I was 14, I pretended to be an older girl on Tumblr and fooled a 19-year-old man just for fun. He wrote me awkward love poems and sent voice messages. I panicked, stopped responding to him, deleted the account, and spent the following month convinced that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was tracking my Wi-Fi. My parents still believe I was just playing The Sims all summer. Story 68. I went with my friends and smashed mailboxes in the middle of the night during one summer. Fun fact, less than 10 years later I became a mail carrier. I guess that was my punishment or karma. Story 69. I literally died and was brought back, only to be driven out into the desert to be murdered on my birthday, while my parents were in town to visit. To summarize, I overdosed on heroin at a friend's house. I remember hearing them fight about my body while I was lying on the kitchen floor, unable to move but conscious. They decided I was practically dead, put me in a car, and took me to the desert near Tucson, Arizona. At that point, I honestly thought I was dead. Luckily, they just left me there and did not finish me off. I met up with my mom and dad the next day and apologized for not being able to get off work to see them on my birthday. Of course, I was not actually at work. Story 70. I was 12 years old in 9th grade. My friends were mostly seniors and bad influences. My 18-year-old friend and I went with her early 20s buddy up Mount St. Helens at night. We got his little Volkswagen truck stuck in the runaway truck ramp deep in rock. We walked many miles to the new and unopened Coldwater Visitor Center. We got there just after dawn. I called another friend to come get us, and I slept all day. I had many other insane adventures with the same friend. Fortunately, she graduated and quickly had children. Otherwise, I might not have lived this long. Story 71. I was in a car accident in a place I was not supposed to be. One of my toes was cut off. I glued it back on with electrical tape, and it stayed. They never found out. Story 72. I had a friend whose boyfriend pretended to be her dad and spoke to my mom on the phone to assure her we were spending the night there. Looking back, it makes me physically sick. That friend's boyfriend was much older, as were all the guys we were hanging out with. He rented a hotel room for all of us at a bad motel that night. Other times, I snuck out the window and put a doll in my bed with pillows to make it look like I was there. On my dad's behalf, while they were going through a divorce when I was about 10, I changed all the clocks in the house, put sugar in the gas tank, nails in the tires, and snooped through everything. My dad never found out about any of the crazy and stupid things I did as a teen because he wasn't around. Story 73. It is not a big deal, but it haunts me. My parents and I were in the back of the house, and they were discussing summer camps. They told me to find my much older brother and ask him if he wanted to go to a baseball camp. I looked but did not find him, so I went back to my parents and told them he said yes. I have always wondered what happened next. Story 74. When I was 10 or 11, we had an alley that was just grass and no pavement behind my backyard. One of the neighborhood kids, whose name I don't remember, and I somehow got some gasoline and tried to start a fire back there. Thankfully, it had rained recently, so nothing really burned. We were caught by one of our other neighbors. I remember begging him not to tell my mom, and he never did. He just scolded us himself. I turned 30 this year and still haven't told anyone. Story 75. I got tipsy and drove to Tulsa from southwest Missouri to get drunk. I got into a fight in Tulsa and drove home in time to go to church in the morning. Story 76. I found a bunch of marijuana in my mother's purse. I panicked, grabbed a few of the baggies, and had the best month of my life after school with my friends because we had been smoking low-quality marijuana. My mother thought my father took it, and my father thought my mother smoked it, so I only recently revealed the truth that they never knew. Story 77. I was hit by a bus while crossing the road. It was my fault, and I was embarrassed. Luckily, there were only really bad bruises that I managed to hide for months. Story 78. Staying over at a friend's house. We sneaked out and went exploring on our bicycles at 2 a.m. We probably ended up about 6 miles away before we became scared and turned back. We were 8 years old. Story 79. Recreationally shocking myself on the neighbor's electric fence because I liked the feeling is quite unusual. Story 80. Reading these makes me think I am either boring or my parents just would not care about half the things I do, as long as I am alive and safe. Story 81. The water was cut off at a school, so I went around and put the plugs in all the sinks and turned the taps on. The next morning, I was informed that the school had been flooded by a water leak late in the evening and would be closed for a few weeks. Story 82. It was after school. I was bored and decided to hide a classmate's shoe. It got to a point where practically everyone left in the school was looking for the kid's missing shoe. Students, teachers, janitors, and even the lady who ran the store searched for the lost shoe. After a couple of hours, I wanted to go home, so I finally found the shoe near the library. What is even crazier is that I did it twice. Story 83. They probably knew but never acknowledged it. My dad had his candy truck broken into, so he put all the candy in a specific closet. All his daughters raided that closet quite often. Story 84. Threw 12 bundled cherry bombs down the main vent stack of despicable neighbors who used their children as drug pushers in junior high school. Blew up their plumbing with a 2-minute length of fuse to allow enough time to get off the roof. They deserved it. Story 85. At the school, there was a pond and a ditch separated by a dirt road. One day, my friends and I went to dig the dirt road. The next day, the road collapsed into a mess. Until now, no one knows that my friend and I caused it. Story 86. One of the schools I attended had recurring sports days. There were no classes, just various competitions with teams. The team that won the most points got a party. My friend and I decided to leave and explore different areas of the campus away from the events. We got hungry and ordered pizza. It was a private school, so the delivery person had to give the pizza to the guards at the gate, who thankfully did not tell on us as they handed us our prize. Story 87. A friend of mine and I, at the age of 16 or 17, thumbed a ride from Massachusetts to Vermont during a snowy winter to see a guy I liked who was skiing there. We made it just fine but never told our parents. At least I didn't. I ended up marrying the guy I went to see. We are divorced now, my fault, but I wish we weren't. We are in contact, and I pray every night that we get back together. To anyone thinking about getting divorced, really think long and hard about it. The man I married stabbed me several times. He is in jail now, and the final sentence has been made. I am not looking forward to the court appearance. I have been through a lot of physical therapy, but am not the same as I was before. I cannot watch any shows that have violence. The only good thing that may have come from this is that my surgeon had to write a request for more blood than the blood bank normally allows. He guaranteed that I would live if I received the blood. I am glad he wrote that letter. I pray every night for anyone being abused or suffering as I have. Story 88. I was listening to some cool music, tapping my foot to the rhythm unknowingly. Downstairs, my parents tried to sleep. They thought the neighbor was doing some repair work. It has been 30 years, and they still do not know the real source of that sound. Story 89. I stole brand new exercise books from a school. My father found out and made me return them. That was scarier. Story 90. I decided that a random boy was bullying me, but he was not. I just did not like the way he looked at me. I told my parents all about it and he got in trouble, but I do not know to what extent. I really hope it did not mess things up for him too badly. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.